This is Back Roads of Illinois server to farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and the Midwest. Today's edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were bringing you lasted for farming sources and information sponsored by Agri Gold. We're glad you're here on today for our program. I'm Cesar Delgado on today. All right, today is the sale of Champion at the State Fair in Springfield with livestock at the Coliseum. Otherwise, we will talk about the weather in the Midwest and Central Illinois with Drew Lerner from World Weather in Kansas City. And then the World Supply and Demand Report was coming out for last week with the yield trends for today's corn and beans as well. However, the beans have a different story about the yield with corn from the report. The yield was 181 between 184. What is the actual numbers from last Friday? I'm joining with Chip N from Blue Reef Agri Markets in Morton, Illinois. You've been listening to Back Roads of Illinois. We will talk about the weather in the Midwest and Central Illinois with Drew Lerner from World Weather in Kansas City. Welcome back, Drew. How are
Thank
you
you.
doing?
Thank you, Caesar. I'm doing very well and trying to enjoy what's left of the summer. It's getting to be close to autumn now, so I'm looking forward to a little cooler weather at night.
Great to hear that. I know. Drew, let's discuss about the temperatures and the weather for next couple weeks ahead before ahead of the harvest. What is your thoughts on that?
The temperatures look to be fairly good for this time of the year. The majority of the Midwest has not had excessive heat for very long this summer, as you know. We've had some very warm and humid days, but as far as extreme temperatures is concerned, we have not had much of that. And the forecast for these next couple of weeks will probably continue to perpetuate that relatively well. We'll see the temperatures maybe try to warm up just a slight little bit in this first few days of the outlook. But as we move into next week and the following weekend, we will see the temperatures starting to cool down a little bit more. And that will help to conserve moisture in the soil and also prevent crops from being seriously stressed in those areas that have the lower soil moisture. So it's not a bad scenario.
Are we going to be cooler by next week in Illinois?
I think Illinois will probably cool down during the week next week. I don't know that I would say we're going to be cool biased until the latter part of the week and into the weekend. But yes, indeed, we will see a cooling tendency taking place, and that should bring down the stress levels for those areas in the Midwest that have not been getting very good rainfall here recently.
Because I am tired of being hot.
Yes, you and a lot of other folks. The summers can be awful long, even if it's not hotter than normal. Just having the high humidity and the warm temperatures at night, along with the warm afternoons, can make it a very long summer. But this year we have had a relatively good mix of rain and sunshine, so it has not been quite as persistently hot and stressful as it might have otherwise been. And I think most of us humans, as well as the crops, have benefited greatly from this pattern.
It is normal season.
It is. It is. The weather pattern has continued to show a relatively good distribution of rain. Our soil moisture across the Midwest still looks very good. There is a drying tendency, though, that is underway across portions of the eastern Midwest. In particular, we have seen that dry down occur in Michigan, parts of Indiana, Ohio, even Illinois. And the driest conditions, though, have been farther south in the Delta and the Tennessee River Basin area. Those areas have very short topsoil moisture and short subsoil moisture. The stress levels in crop areas there in the Delta and really from the far southern tip of Illinois and southeastern Missouri on into the Tennessee River Basin are all included in that a little bit of a dryness problem area. And we do need to see some rain in those regions. Now, I don't expect to see a lot of rain show up for another week or at least 5 days. I think at some point next week, scattered showers and thunderstorms will likely occur, offering at least temporary relief in those areas. Now, for the eastern Midwest, the Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio areas, I think for them, we will probably see some showers and thunderstorms occurring a little bit sooner, although the amount of rain that occurs in the southern parts of those states will probably not be very great in this first week of the outlook.
How is the weather forecast to be able to get it finished with this crop?
You know, the weather, I think in general, is not bad for finishing out the crop. However, we are a bit concerned about late August and early September weather, just simply because in the past, when we've been in a weather pattern like this one, we have tended to dry down parts of the eastern Midwest, the Delta and the Tennessee River Basin. And if that trend continues into late August or early September, there would be some potential for seeing moisture stress have a negative impact on soybeans and other late season crops. Now, I'm not advocating a big problem for these areas, though. I think that there will be a decline in soil moisture and an increase in crop moisture stress in the eastern Midwest, but I don't think it's going to get bad enough that we're going to see a serious downward pressure on yields in that region. Now, for the Delta and the Tennessee River Basin, it could be a little different story. A lot will depend on the tropics. If we have a tropical system coming up into the Gulf of America, we might end up getting some better rains to occur in some of those drier biased areas. But right now, most of the models are suggesting that in the second week forecast, which would be the 21st through the 27th, we should see scattered showers and thunderstorms increase in the Delta and Tennessee River Basin area. And there should be some periodic light precipitation in the Midwest as well. And I think as long as that occurs, as the models are suggesting, we should be able to eke by with a marginally beneficial amount of moisture in the soil to carry on normal crop development. I don't see any excessive heat, so the evaporation rates will likely be relatively normal or perhaps a little bit below normal, especially when we get into the cooler biased conditions next week. And so that will likely help to keep the crops viable, even if the rainfall becomes more minimal. But this all sounds like I'm looking for a notable dry down, and that's really not what I'm trying to say. I think for the most part, it's going to be a favorable finish for the season, but I don't think that we're going to keep the same pace of shower and thunderstorm activity that we've had up until now. And I do think that the eastern and southern parts of the Midwest will have a below normal precipitation bias, but it will still be timely rain and it will still be supportive for the crops. So I think in general, we're going to finish out relatively well. Now, I am a little bit concerned about some cool weather that might come around as we get into September, which might slow down crop development. I don't think there's going to be a threat of damaging coal necessarily, but I do think that we'll see some cooler weather next month as well.
Do you have any final thoughts on this fall drip?
I think the only other comment that I'd like to make would have to do with Canada and parts of the north central United States, mostly outside of the key corn and soybean areas. I mentioned before that there may be some cooler biased conditions that come around this September. And I do think that it'll be cool enough that we might see some early season frost events occur. Now, for Canada, early season frost and freezes would have to be in August rather than September. So I think some early September frost and freezes will likely evolve in some parts of Canada's prairies. But with the fact that it's been dry up that way during a fair amount of this summer, the crops are far enough advanced that they shouldn't be seriously harmed. But don't be surprised if we see a significant cool off take place in the first week of September and also again in the third week of September, with the latter event possibly reaching down into parts of the Midwest. I do not at this point in time anticipate any kind of serious threat of damaging cold in the Midwest. But with that said, I do think that we will be experiencing some very chilly weather for a brief period of time in the month of September. And again, the first and the third weeks seem to be most favored for that cooler bias.
Thanks, Drew. This is Drew Lerner from Weather World on Back Road. The world supply and demand report was coming out for yesterday with the yield trends for today's corn and beans as well. However, the beans have a different story about the yield with corn from the report. The yield was 181 between 184. What is the actual numbers from last Friday? I'm joining with Chip N from Blue Reef Agri Markets in Morton, Illinois. Hi, Chip. How are things in central Illinois with the corn crop?
Well, they're a mixed bag. They look really good from the road. Maybe speeding up towards maturing a little bit early here with some of the heat we've had, some disease pressure that's popping up. According to the USDA from yesterday's report, though, we've got a monstrous crop out there. So that was a historic report for an August crop report. Usually you don't get a lot of changes on that thing, but man, there were some real head scratchers and some massive changes on that report.
How is the weeds on the beans?
Yeah, beans, same thing as corn. I mean, some really good potential out there. We've had some decent rains in areas. It's been on the warm side. We still can have Mother Nature affect things here the next 3 or 4 weeks. And so I don't think anybody would not want maybe one more general nice rain on these beans. They look good, but again, they are really hard to peg until you get combines out in there and get to harvesting them.
Yeah, we got rains last night.
Yeah, and those were scattered. I mean, if you're lucky enough to be getting them, they're very beneficial, but not everyone is. And those areas that aren't, it's been awful hot in here too. So it's a real mixed bag as we come into the end of the growing season here the next few weeks. And again, it can still affect final yields. And we'll have to see again what this USDA report from yesterday with a big acreage increase and a massive 7.8 bushel increase in corn. We'll see if that's out there. We got some crop tours starting, and the September crop report a month from now actually gets out and does actual field surveys. This past report was not actual field checks. So there can be some big changes, going forward here the next few months on what the market's perception of crop size is versus what the reality is once we get into harvest.
How about 1/2 of the rain from last night, I think?
Yeah, and again, the rains have been scattered, a little more general in the western Corn Belt. Some areas, particularly like southern Wisconsin, have just got flooding rain. So it's a little bit for everyone in there. Unfortunately, it's like that every year. But there's been areas that have had perfect rainfall. There's been areas with too much rain. There's been a lot of wind. In fact, I think I read that this is one of the top growing seasons or summers as far as the wind. There's been a lot of hail. There's a lot of disease showing up out there. There's just a little bit of everything we're throwing at this crop. So it's going to be interesting to see how, we end up on final yields here.
Yeah. What was your thoughts with the yield trends in the report from yesterday?
Yeah, again, it was just a real wild card out there. I don't know if I necessarily agree with the USDA. They were up 7.8 bushels on corn to 188.8. That would be a new record yield by 9 bushels. Up 1.1 bushels on beans to 53.6. That would be a new record. They added 2.1 million acres of corn, took away 2.5 million acres of beans. That's very rare for an August report. They changed corn demand dramatically, up 545 million bushels. And so that's a high bar. That's a high bar to hit on both corn and beans. We'll see if it's really out there in the end result. Pro Farmer Crop Tour starts next week. That will be very closely watched. And that's the debate. Do we really have a 188.8 corn crop out there? Or is the USDA going to have to ratchet that back closer to trend line at 181 by the end result? And the problem now is even if they do go lower on yields, because they increase demand so much, over a 500 million bushel demand increase in corn, if they come back and readjust corn yields lower, they can then have a cushion now to pull back out of demand. And it's unfortunate that we get this August report having such extremes in a lot of different directions. Maybe not on the most accurate of data, because it's really something that's a potential hindrance to U.S. farmers in the case of corn. Now, in the case of beans, even though they went up 1.1 bushels on yield, because of the 2.5 million acre decrease, they only went down 43 million on demand, and the carryout ended out only at 290 million bushels. That was down 20 million bushels from last month, and that was actually 20 million bushels below the average or below the lowest estimate. So even though we have a record yield projected on beans, the carryout still is very, very tight because of a 2.5 million acre cut. But that's assuming that demand's right, because that's a big wild card. With no China trade deal, there probably needs to be more than 43 million bushels cut out of bean demand. So Caesar, the bottom line here is, as we go forward in the September, the October report, and even on into the January final crop report, there is a lot of uncertainty that still remains to be kind of figured out by this market. And there's going to be a lot of potential volatility, especially in the bean market.
Do you have any concerns about the supply and demand? It is getting tight after the harvest season by the trade deficit.
Yeah, you know, like I mentioned, I think now there's just such a big black hole of uncertainty out there now after the release of this August report that I don't think anybody knows what way to turn. You know, because of the tariffs and the trade deal not being done yet with China, they haven't bought hardly any of our beans. You know, are all these numbers, the yield, the demand, the acreage going to be correct on corn? I just think there's tons of questions out there that the market still is going to want answers for before it's said and done. So there's nothing set in stone now. Probably more questions than answers after the release of this supply and demand report. Um, you know, big questions on whether we have as big a yields as what is projected out there, or whether all these little problems that have popped up have taken top end of yield off. So it's just going to take time and actual harvest data to kind of get that figured out for the market.
We'll see for next couple weeks. It's uncertainty out there, sure.
Yeah, and then you know, the Pro Farmer Crop Tour, as I mentioned, it starts the 18th and runs, I believe, to the 21st. That always gets a lot of press and attention, and I think the way this August crop report came out, that Pro Farmer Crop Tour is going to be even. Everyone's just going to hang on that, especially in the Eastern Corn Belt. It seems like the question to me is the Eastern Corn Belt, the way the USDA had these corn yields in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee. The season that we've had, late planting, all these other issues out there, really is a question whether we can achieve these yields in the Eastern Corn Belt that what the compared to what the USDA has put out there. So that Pro Farmer Crop Tour on the 18th, it runs most of the week next week. Be really watched very, very closely to see if they find the same thing, big yields, record yields, you know, well above a year ago on those same routes, or are they falling short? If they're falling short, the market's going to figure out probably sooner rather than later that the 188.8 USDA corn yield is not correct and have to adjust backwards. But we'll see what they find on that crop tour, and then, you know, fast enough, we'll have the September crop report in about a month's time. And that will incorporate actual field surveys, weighing ears, weighing pods, doing population counts, doing kernel counts. That is a lot more accurate than the August crop report. So that September crop report will really set the stage for, you know, going into winter and even early next spring, in my opinion.
The corn crop is looking good for this year, before we expected. How are the yield with corn crop?
Yeah, that's the question. That's the question. Things look really good, and I think there's some pockets around that yields probably could be best ever. Especially in the Western Corn Belt. There's probably pockets in Iowa, pockets in Minnesota, pockets in South Dakota, pockets in Nebraska that probably are looking at best ever. There may be some pockets in Illinois, but we'll see. You know, we'll see. It's a very high bar we have set this year. Even at trend line at 181, which is, you know, a bushel and a half higher, almost 2 bushels higher than we achieved a year ago. And now with this August crop report telling us 188.8 on corn, I don't know if that's achievable. We'll see. We'll see. But you know, it's time will tell. But I guess I'm a little hesitant to believe that we have much north of a 181 or 182 crop out there. But time will tell.
What is your thoughts on the cattle markets with these trends in the feeder?
Yeah, boy, cattle still a very bullish setup here. Feeder cattle were up sharply yesterday with the weakness in corn. Everything imaginable is bullish in cattle right now, with the border to Mexico being closed, the tariffs on Brazilian beef. Cattle on feed numbers here 2-3 weeks back were really bullish. Cash markets are strong. The box beef market stays strong. The fundamentals are really friendly to the cattle market. Feeder cattle have been very volatile in here. They had almost a $8 range today, from low to high, up sharply early. They reversed to lower. So we're seeing some massive swings back and forth in feeders. And sometimes markets top on the most bullish news and the most bullish setups. I don't know if we're quite at the top yet, but we're probably closer to the top than maybe what a lot of people realize. The eventual result of this is going to be you got to slow demand down, and we're getting to a high enough price on the beef that I think there's arguments that we are slowing demand down. There's also arguments we're retaining some heifers to slowly build the calf crop as they've recovered from the drought, the multi-year drought in the plains and out west. So at face value, cattle market still very friendly, very bullish, but I wouldn't, become permanently bullish thinking that there's no end in sight to the upside, because the first sign that there's a lot of things that could happen, killing off demand, maybe a packer closes a plant to try to slow things down and get margins for packing back in line a little bit. There's a lot of things that could happen. They opened the border up to Mexico again. Several things that are possibilities that could pop up to derail this bull market in cattle. But right now it looks friendly all around.
Do you have any final thoughts about the fundamentals on the feeder cattle with these prices?
Well, other than just stay very, very diligent with your risk management. There's tremendous profitability potential out there, depending on what segment of the cattle industry you're in. But it doesn't mean it's going to last forever. So just stay very diligent about managing price risk, and keeping some powder dry, keeping your equity held together, because when the break comes, it's probably not going to be a $10 break. You're probably going to be looking at, $40+ in feeders and 20 to 30 in live cattle. So it'd be hard to wait for the break, because if you wait for the break to do something, it may come fast and furious and you won't have a chance to. So I would say cattle producers need to stay diligent. Same advice on the grain side. Let crop insurance be your backstop in here. Don't be fearful about pricing some beans if we get up closer to 11 here over the next few weeks, and try to live to fight another day, because it's very challenging out here for the row crops right now.
Thanks, Chip.
Thanks, Caesar, for having me.
I'm here with Chip N from Blue Reef Agri Market, Sunback Roads of Illinois.